Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and we're going to do another fleet composition video, and the most liked suggestion at the time of this recording was 5 people moving valuable items through dangerous space. So we're going to have a few different ways to break this down, including cramming everybody into a very single capable vessel, having one cargo ship with appropriate escorts, or sharing the load across all of the ships in the fleet. So with that in mind, we're going to end up hitting on 3 with my best recommendations and go from there. So first thing to note about this video is that I'm going to say that we're carrying a fair amount of cargo. Since I don't really have a specific number to go on, let's just say it's more than a few crates. So we're going to say that the number is about 100 SCU of goods. So that way we're not just saying put the cargo in a redeemer and you're all set. That sounds like a good number to me. Now, we're also talking about high value, lower cargo as far as the total is concerned. So we're not hauling mass amounts of like potatoes. We're hauling a small amount of really expensive goods through dangerous space. One other note is we could obviously say something like, well, a javelin would obviously be the best option because no one would engage it, which is true, but it's not really in the spirit of what this discussion is about or going to be practical for the majority of players out there. So starting off with a single ship approach, I think your best singular bet would be to run the Constellation Andromeda. It's rated at 134 SCU as of now. The ship has a cargo hold that's big enough to carry the 100 SCU in this example in the main cargo hold. The ship itself also offers a lot of different stations to your members, and the Merlin as a snub-nosed fighter to be deployed when necessary. Weapons-wise, the Andromeda comes with 2 turrets with decent-sized weaponry, 4 size 4 gimbaled laser cannons that can be replaced with 4 fixed size 5 weapons like the M7A, which makes for a crazy powerful forward attack. And in addition to those weapons, it carries a ton of size 1 and size 2 missiles, which can help to either destroy or deter your attackers. Now, when carrying cargo in dangerous space, you need to be capable of deterring attacks and dealing with them when they appear. The Constellation in this example by herself isn't probably going to be much of a deterrent to a group of attackers, but they're also probably not making the assumption that you're a fully crewed ship either. So if you're going to be engaged, I think the distribution of your 5 people should include somebody flying the pilot or flying the actual ship. They're keeping the turret gunners in position. They're manning the main weapons and doing a lot of the big damage. Then you have someone else on the bridge managing shields, doing power management, and general scanning and relaying of information to the crew. You then have another person in the top turret, another person in the bottom turret, and then finally something that kind of makes this into a multi-crew situation is you've got somebody jumping into the Merlin to get out there, act as a pest. They're trying to get people off of your ship's hard-to-hit areas, and then forcing them into positions where the Constellation can end up doing the real damage. I think coordinating everybody on board is a factor that you're going to want to really kind of work through in different scenarios because you're probably going to want somebody that's ready and able to kind of do some engineering type of roles for repairs if it ends up being needed. That person in my mind is either going to be your shield person if the pilot or one of the turret gunners can end up taking on some of the power management, or you could end up possibly taking the person out of the bottom turret. And the reason I say that is because that turret is the hardest one to keep on target. Basically, it's more natural when you're pitching up in combat to help your top turret gunner stay on target. The bottom one's a little bit wonkier to deal with. So if the pilot can then focus on just keeping their guns and one other person's on target, it becomes a little bit easier, even though you're reducing a little bit of firepower. Yeah, so that's a bit of a decision that you're going to need to make, kind of weigh out your crew competencies, but I think it's important to note. In addition, the Constellation has pretty good shields, decent armor, and good coverage when you factor in the pilot-controlled weaponry. The turret placement's not bad, and having an additional fighter on board. It's really pretty much the best single-ship approach that turns into a multi-ship approach. Now, one thing to consider would be the decent range in crew stations, meaning that you could probably travel for longer without having to stop, which is likely where there's going to be attacks and ambushes waiting. And, having multiple crew stations allows you to be more effective in scanning and route planning when you're not in combat, which may help you to avoid that combat at the end of the day. Now, I think a ship like the Banu Merchantman is an interesting option for this too. It's heavily armored. It's pretty fast, but it's going to be overkill for the size of this operation. And I also think the Retaliator, with all of the turrets being manned except for one, is an interesting option too. And it's probably less likely to be thought of as carrying cargo instead of torpedoes. Now, I still pick the Constellation in this instance, but either of those should be able to get the job done. Now, when we get to our first multi-crew example, we're looking at one cargo vessel and escorts. And seeing as we're not required to fit 5 people into one ship in this situation, I would pick the Freelancer Max as the cargo option here. It's big enough to carry the goods, it's a smaller target than the Constellation, which should also allow it to go through smaller jump points. The ship is capable of carrying as much cargo as you need in this situation. It should have a solid range, engine's big enough to kind of give it decent speed, and could carry an extra person for the turret if needed. But that doesn't always make sense depending on your situation, because if you take a turret gunner, you're removing another escort ship, which is decreasing your overall firepower, while it could potentially end up saving you some cost. That's a hard decision to make because there's a lot of factors that go into cost, so we'll end up doing both. So in the situation where you have 3 ships remaining because you have a second person in the Freelancer, I would opt to have a Hornet tracker that ends up being capable of identifying threats from a long way off, and acting as mission control for the convoy. All while still being a very capable fighter with its 3 size 3 weapons and missile loadout. That leaves you with 2 other ships, and since you already had the Freelancer and the Hornet, you're going to be missing out on speed and agility. So I think having 2 fast ships that are capable of some more advanced dogfighting would be a good bet. So I would probably bring 2 Sabres, or a Sabre and a Buccaneer. Basically 2 faster and more agile ships that are still capable of bringing on a lot of damage onto that target. Now, if you opted to not have a second person in the Freelancer, then my 4th ship, as far as escort is concerned, would be a Super Hornet. You're bringing a brawler into this fight. It can take on a lot of damage. It can deal a lot of damage. I mean, it's a really good escort ship, although range becomes a little bit of a factor there. Another good option could be 1 person in a Freelancer, 3 people in a Redeemer with 2 people in turrets. That's a scary ship with a lot of weapons, and then having a light option like a Buccaneer or a Sabre. I think that changes as a bit, depending on range, and if you know you're going to be traveling much longer distances, I'm still opting for the Freelancer Max, but then I'm bringing probably 2 Vanguards along with a turret gunner in each. Now, 1 Vanguard can get in trouble against much lighter targets, but if you have 2, they can help to keep each other clear while utilizing their turret gunners, dealing a boatload of damage and able to absorb a lot of it themselves. The last piece that could change in any of these scenarios would be potentially dropping a fighter for something like a Herald or a Sentinel. Something that's capable of electronic warfare could potentially disable attackers, allowing the fleet to flee and just avoid the trouble instead of actually having to deal with it head on. In our last example, we're talking about sharing the cargo load between a few ships. And since we have 100 SCU that we need to find homes for in this example, it becomes a little bit tricky because there's a big drop-off in cargo carrying capacity from like 30 SCU to 100 range. There's a kind of a gap there. Now, the Cutlass today is rated at about 31 SCU, though with the rework, it appears that it's going to be getting significantly bigger, and I'm hoping it ends up around 50 or so SCU. And if that ends up coming to fruition, I would personally bring 2 Cutlass Blacks with a turret gunner in each, and a lighter, more dedicated dogfighter along, like a Sabre, a Buccaneer, or even a Gladius. I think that gives you the most bang for your buck and would be a pretty scary fleet to oppose. Not to mention already looking a bit like a pirate or an outlaw group, since you're carrying the reputation of an outlaw flying the Cutlass. So basically you may end up not drawing as much attention from other pirates. Now that's making the assumption that you're going to be able to carry 50 or more SCU after the rework is completed. Now if we stick to the current numbers, I don't think you're really going to be able to beat anything that we've already mentioned. I think going with the Freelancer Max and carrying more cargo there, and then having a higher level of escorts is going to pay bigger dividends in the end than just about anything else. Currently, the stats page, which is pretty outdated as we all know, has the Freelancer Miss slated at about 52 SCU of cargo. So bringing 2 of those along would be an interesting idea and should be able to carry the amount of cargo. However, the base Freelancer is actually rated at 51 SCU after the rework. And we know that the Freelancer Miss is going to carry less cargo based on the missile storage and the restocking system that it carries in the back. So 2 of those is likely not going to end up being able to carry the cargo. Now, if you're dead set on carrying the cargo and 3 ships evenly, then I would say 3 Freelancer Misses would be incredibly hard to beat from a cargo carrying ability through dangerous space, because it would be really scary to face all of those missiles and relatively big weapons, 3 of them all combined in one little fleet. So that's going to be our second fleet composition video. If you guys have suggestions on what you want to see next, please toss them in the comments. And the one that ends up getting thumbs up the most will be the next episode. If you have different ideas or comments on this fleet setup, go ahead and toss those in the comments as well. So make sure you're staying tuned for a lot more content coming soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Take care.